All right, again, welcome back, everybody. Mark and I are here to do this closing session. We'll admit we don't have a real formal format, but the general gist of what we want to do here is just wrap up what's happened here, reflect on what we're taking away from the variety of sessions that we've had since last week, and maybe chat a little bit about where we go from here. But really, we just want to do that. This session is actually a little bit different than the others, not just because it's a closing session, but also because we'll be able to hear from some of you, actually hear your voices if you are so inclined. So the way you'll do that is you'll raise your hand and we can call on people who've raised their hand, and your microphone will be unmuted and you can actually speak, and the audience as well as us can hear your thoughts. So you don't only have to write in the chat or in the Q&A or the chat, you can also raise your hand if you would like to be heard. And so I think what we've decided that we're going to do is just kind of talk about each day, and we'll give a few reflections on each day and then invite you to share yours as well. Okay, so that'll be the process. And so I'll get started because I was the chair of the first two roundtables on last Monday, roundtables on parenting Black youth in the 21st century and on our anti-racist public schools possible. Those were the two that we had over a week ago. There's so many things that I feel like I would take away from these sessions. But in general, there's this theme, I think, around Black people needing to take matters into their own hands and create support for themselves in a world that's riddled with white supremacy and various structures that don't support people. So there was an interesting sort of thread I felt across those two sessions, even though they were themed differently, that there was a big sense around Black parents needing to pull together the resource to support their children, just inform them about racism and protect them and keep them supported. And same thing for the schools about the importance of advocacy at schools, but then also for schools to actually develop structures of their own anti-racist kinds of actual schools or anti-racist programming that actually ends up supporting students. I don't know if you have any other things you're thinking you take away from that, Mark?
So similarly, one of the themes that I thought about was these two kind of separate things that came together. One, as you described, was the need, desire, motivation of Black people, Black communities to create these spaces for the children, for education, but then also the demands that they put on these public systems to provide for Black folks. And it was interesting, this happens sometimes for education within the public system. So we had an Afrocentric public school, the Betty Shabazz school, but then we also had folks talking about curriculum and things outside of the school system. So in that conversation happened together, and people are interacting with each other in both of these ways. And so both of those sessions I thought were great because they talked about how obviously Black people exist in America and separate from, and have control probably more in these spaces separate from, but also exert control in different ways in these systems that are supposed to be designed for everybody to try to make them work for us. Yeah. The other thing I'll just throw out there to folks, ask questions, but also we'd love to hear just what you remember from those first couple sessions, if you can. It seems like a long time ago, but if there's things you might remember from those first couple of sessions on that day.
Yeah, so again, you can raise your hand. Okay, we have Lillian who would like to comment. Lillian, you can go ahead.
And Lillian, you're muted in case you've started speaking.
Sorry about that. Yeah. What struck me was the speaker who was developing a school around anti-racism, and then that being in a curriculum, or somehow she was holding an environment in which kids wouldn't have to deal with racism. And then they were moving into something called abolitionist state. So I was like, that was all foreign language to me. Mm-hmm. So, I'm still kind of processing that first session. So if anybody want to comment and clarify anything for me, I would appreciate it.
I don't think we have any of the panelists who are here. Those are great comments. And I don't think we have any of the panelists that were here who were actually invoking those terms. I do know from just my, my participation in academia and being sort of on the periphery of certain kinds of discussions, because I'm not an education specialist. I do know that that is a newer term that people are talking about, abolitionist education, and it's different than anti-racist education. I think it's sort of along the lines of some of the, you could parallel it with some of the ways that people are talking about defunding the police. I think it's that kind of a concept of taking the resources away from certain kinds of structures that aren't working and thinking about trying to rebuild something. Somebody who is a more specialist in the field, I think could speak more eloquently and detailed about it. Or we invite anybody who from the audience who might have some knowledge in this area to contribute.
Yeah. So we move on.
I do just want to say, sorry, I do just want to say you're not alone in being unfamiliar with some of the terms that came up in that. And actually, I have colleagues who are specialists in education from an earlier generation of the research that people are doing, and also are unfamiliar with that term abolitionist education. So it is fairly new, and not everybody, even some education specialists, are not using it or familiar with it. Shall we move on to the next day? Mark, you want to take that one?
Sure. So on the Tuesday, we had another two really good roundtable discussions. The first one was the future of Black Commons, and the second one was on Black business and economic freedom. And I'll just say, isn't this kind of separate from the content of those? We did think a little bit about what sessions would be on each day, but I don't think we anticipated the really interesting ways that they would really connect to each other thematically. Maybe Carla did. I didn't quite anticipate how, how well connected they would be. But I'll just say, for the morning session was really quite powerful. Really fortunate to have Ashley Scott, who is part of a group leading a pretty phenomenal initiative in rural Georgia for folks just to remind people, the Freedom Georgia Initiative. And so hearing her in conversation with scholars and with Patricia from Cote d'Ivoire, who has a different but related project in Africa about space and land, and was really, I think, quite phenomenal. And the collab session after that one was really good as well, because people were really quite inspired. And then in the afternoon, conversation was focused on business and funding and how that makes it into Black businesses and Black business development. And also there had a really, I think, powerful conversation and discussion about kind of what's happening and what could happen if adequate resources were directed towards Black economic development and economic freedom.
Yeah, I agree. I think these two panels went really nicely together. If you happen to go to both, I think most people would have walked away thinking about that, because, it was a lot about self-determination in business, in community building, and I thought there was a lot of connection there. I also think one thing that struck me by these, so we end up, after we finish the sessions, we end up sending everybody a thank you note, just a thank you email for their participation. And what I've really appreciated is also the ways that they have connected among themselves during the session and even afterwards. I keep talking about the fact that, of course, our mission is about collaboration and connection. And I'm walking away definitely feeling like that's certainly happening, at least with those who participated on the panels. And my sense from the collab session is that it's even expanding beyond that as well. So it's just been really nice to observe the energy and interest and connections among the panelists. That seems like it has some future possibilities as well.
I think we have a question or comment from Bernita.
I'm going to unmute your Benita, if that's okay.
I was fascinated by the community in Georgia, but I also wondered about the focus or maybe it wasn't a sole focus, but the focus on cannabis is part of that community. And I still wonder if that will put people off or become a problem. And then also when I brought up about security for a Black community, and her comment about every household would be encouraged to have a gun, um, that also concerned me. So, but it is fascinating to me to have those communities.
It's interesting you mentioned about cannabis. A couple of days, I think it was yesterday, that the town where Northwestern is, Evanston, passed a resolution to do what they're calling reparations, but it's being funded by a tax on cannabis. And this kind of element of conversation actually came up in I think in the 2019 conference after Sandy Darity's talk about reparations. Now, I should say he does not advocate using a tax on cannabis for reparations, but others have talked about that. And so it is, and that's a whole nother conversation about why there's that connection and does it make sense? Does it not make sense? But yeah, Bernie, I thank you for lifting that. It was interesting that they've decided that they want to make that association connection.
Next we're gonna hear from Jerome.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I was also enjoyed that roundtable discussion, and it was interesting to me that they talked about Blacks wanting a resurgence of Black businesses now, and I've watched several times that new Black businesses are coming up, and the most interesting thing, of course, is how many businesses were lost years and years ago by, I think it was the Allen man, last name Allen, I think he's at Duke. Is he at Duke? Wilmot Allen?
Oh, Wilmot, Olal, yeah.
Okay, and he talked about how highways and things have come through different areas of Black businesses, and that wiped them out so much, many, many times ago. So I thought that was a really interesting discussion, both sessions.
Thank you. Shall we take one more and then we'll move on to the next day, just being mindful of the time. Let's hear from Alexander.
Yes, good afternoon. Oh no, is it after? It is just afternoon, isn't it? Just about.
Just starting.
It's just a point that the leader of the House of Commons, which is the UK governing body, Rees-Mogg, is the head of a £1 billion medicinal cannabis company. And I find it interesting that this drug, which has been used for thousands of years, I'm not advocating in any way, or I'm not for or against, I'm just pointing out what I think is the sheer hypocrisy of jailing people for using that particular drug. And at the meantime, the people who do that are certainly people who participate a great deal in alcohol consumption. And I think if you look at the general outcome of alcohol consumption, there is far more violence within families and breakups caused through alcohol addiction than the use of cannabis. And I just find it interesting now, I believe also Canada has legalized in some of its provinces the use of cannabis. And it's funny to me how when something can make money, all of a sudden the attitudes that have prevailed for a long time change because money can be made. I'm just making a comment, just to sort of pass that on for thought. The fact that the leader of the House of Commons in Britain heads a company, a hedge fund that is using or is producing medicinal cannabis. Interesting thought.
Thank you.
Thanks. On the next day, the next 2 days really, we had a series of films and books, and I think we had at least one partner panel, maybe two over those days. I'm scanning the schedule. I hadn't committed it entirely to memory. There's a lot to encapsulate here, and we won't be able to do justice to all of them by reflecting on all of them. But we would welcome hearing from you if any of the films or books stood out for you. You have any comments? We had the film Green Days by the River on Trinidad, and we had the film Black Ice on Black rock climbers, the book Banking on Freedom about the first Black woman-owned bank in Richmond, and the film-esque feature on Cardiff 19, the riots in Wales from 1919. So, and I think we had a partner panel in there somewhere. I'm maybe skipping it.
That's on the next day. Let's stick to Wednesday first.
Okay.
There was a lot of
yeah.
books and films.
These Wednesday was rich. We had, all of those films and things. We're hoping that everybody got a chance to view the films. If you haven't, some of the links, at least one of them is expiring today, and some of others may soon. So we really encourage you to watch them. I will just say that for me, it was a treat to view them all, and and also to talk with the authors. When we talked with Shanette Garrett Scott on Banking on Freedom, that was, really wonderful. The book is so important. We really encourage everybody to read it. It's just, a history that too many of us don't know, and it really just taps into really important questions around race, gender, and finance, and the history of that in this country. And the films were quite varied. They really touched on quite a range of things, but in some ways you might think about them as certainly some little known experiences. I mean, that might be one way that encapsulated all of them. Mark, do you have any thoughts?
One just for the books, please take the time to find them, and hopefully in your local library or purchase. You are correct, Carla, that Black Ice and Green Days by the River, today is the last day they'll be available for conference registrants. Cardiff 1919 is publicly available, so you're encouraged to check that out whenever you can. I think one thing that was interesting for me is the process that we went through to identify these and bring these folks in. And we made space in the conference for 3 books, 3 films, but we could have been like 50 easily of both of those. I mean, there's just phenomenal work coming out from Black authors, Black filmmakers, about our lived experiences, our histories, but also about imagined futures and all these things. So even if you aren't able to see these, please take the time to find additional ones and others. And if you would like, send us a note. We can send other book recommendations. I'll just put a plug in the daily links that you've been getting every day. At the bottom are other books by roundtable speakers. And there's just another whole set of books, and I think one film in there that you can take a look at. On the Thursday of March 18th, we had one more book talk and 2 partner panels. The book talk was Call Baby, which is fiction by author Morgan Jerkins. And the 2 partner panels, one was Freedom Hill, Casting a Community Vision for Equity for Black Students in North Carolina, which was hosted by NC Creed, which is a education nonprofit based here in North Carolina. And another partner panel called Black Community, Engaging Authentically with Communities of Color, which featured a community university partnership based at North Carolina State University in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Bernita, I'll let you talk.
And this is just a comment that I found that segment of the Black conference just very inspiring. The variation in the type films and to be able to talk to the authors was really rich. So I just wanted to comment.
Thank you. Any other comments that people would like to offer on either of those 2 days with films, partner panels, and book talks?
One thing I'll throw in is hopefully people are thinking of what they might say. We had a question about what's the absolute latest we can view these films. We told the platforms today, so it's possible they're not, if you go to the link, you won't be able to watch it, but it's possible they'll be open to midnight. So just please, if you haven't, as soon as you can, click on the link to try to watch them. I will say the platform that Green Days by the River is on is Quelly TV, which is a Black woman founded, started streaming platform. And the woman who started, Deshana, she was also participated in the panel with the filmmakers. And if you would like to subscribe to that service, you can, pay to watch that film and a whole host of other films and other series from the entire African diaspora. They've done a really good job of collecting films and series made by Black folks in the United States, but also across the Caribbean, UK, and in Africa as well.
I think that brings up something which is that there are lots of ways to support the work of the people who have been profiled here for the conference. A lot of them are connected to businesses, organizations, initiatives that if you read their profiles on our website, you can learn about. And if you're interested, there's a push now, of course, to support Black businesses and activities. And one way to do that is to see all the work that's being done by the folks who were on our agenda here and do that. So there are many, many ways. And if you missed any sessions, you can look at the sessions, look at the recordings of the sessions and learn more in detail about the work they're doing and how to support them. So encourage that if you're interested. So when we got into the second week this week, on Monday, we started out with the panel Beyond the Lawn Signs and Statements. And the second panel was, that was a roundtable, sorry. And the second roundtable was on, I think I'm on the wrong day. Sorry. The second panel was on ending profiling, police, prisons, and parole as we know it. I think these also went well together. We ended up getting into police on the first panel. The first panel, of course, was really oriented towards thinking about all the efforts around claiming that Black Lives Matter since the summer and what the work of activists and scholar activists have to say about the proliferation of these claims of Black Lives Matter. And I thought it was very interesting. I think one thing that came away from that session for me was the sense of a victory, that there are all these people embracing the notion of Black Lives Matter that was not there before summer 2020. And all the folks on the panel who are deeply involved in different forms of activism really shared that view. At the same time, they said, we need to also have some healthy skepticism about it and hold people to task for it. And they talked about different ways. So I thought that was very interesting. And maybe Mark can comment about some themes from the police and prisons panel.
Yeah, maybe just one thing to add on that one. I think it was in the collab session, there's a lot of conversation about holding accountability and thinking about different ways to hold organizations accountable for statements that they've made, but also for the money that we're spending with them and how to navigate those relationships. And that's something I thought a lot about, is what are all of the tools that are in the toolkit for getting leverage over someone who doesn't report to you or whatever that thing is. Like, how do you exert that kind of power and control? And to your point, that also kind of came out in the afternoon session, that, as you said, was focused on ending profiling, police, prisons, parole as we know it. And it was a really, I think, powerful discussion and conversation. And it was really nice to have Wilfred Olal on that panel, who's a very committed activist who puts his body on the line regularly, combating police violence in Nairobi, and forcing us to think broadly about, people throw around that sort of the systemic term, right? And what does that really mean? But having him there, I think, helped illustrate that, because different places and different geographies construct the same system, right? And the people who are playing those roles in that system may look different. And so you may not be white police officers in Kenya, but they're playing this role oftentimes with disenfranchised communities, whether they're poor, whether they're Black here. And I think it helped us in that session, in the discussion, really think about what it is that we're trying to change, right? It's not necessarily about individual people. It's these structures that form, that create these power relationships that are good for some and not for others. And how do we fight against that? So Bernita has another question, comment.
Can you unmute Bernita?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I think it also would be interesting to follow up on how British colonialism has impacted both of our systems, from Kenya and the U.S. For African enslavement and the aftermath. So I'll just leave it there.
Thank you.
We have one question in the Q&A before we go to the next day from Donovan Hook. Checking in late and may have missed, how can we continue to stay connected with Black Communities Conference mission? Are there ways to stay connected between conferences? So I think there are two answers. One, with us as the conference organizers, and that I think that's fairly straightforward. You should, I think you have our email addresses at this point, or you can we can provide those. And I'll just say both of us in different ways, and our full team, it includes a whole bunch of folks, so hopefully we'll get a minute to mention their names. Throughout the year, do interact with people who have attended conferences, and people have questions. There's a speaker or a person they want to connect to. Sometimes there's things in our work, whether it's Carla's work as an anthropologist or my work as a kind of community economic development person here, how things that we're specifically doing can connect with work of folks that are attended the conference. Happy to make those connections. On the broader one about this fuller community, social media is a really great way to stay connected. And if there's particular things that you would like to share, we're happy to identify those through social media and help connect folks to them. So hopefully those are just some different ways that people can stay connected.
I will add to that. There's some things we started doing in the collab session that I found valuable, which is if you want to share your information with this group here and you're comfortable putting it in the chat, you are free to put your name and your email address or some form of contact for you, a social media handle or something, and put it in this chat and mention what you'd like to connect with people about. And people can take that information if it's something that they're interested in. So we can also use this moment as a chance to connect and carry those things forward as well. Mark, do you want to go on to the next day?
Sure. So I guess that was yesterday. We had two, I think, roundtables that it felt to me kind of personal. I mean, maybe it was just me personally, but had kind of an intimate feel to them. One was Deep Rivers, the Arts and Music of Racial Reckoning. And then in the afternoon, we had Gender and Sexuality in Black Lives. And I think just broadly, I think both of these sessions spoke about things that are, I guess, saying more internal to people. So how the role that arts and music plays in our lives, whether or not we claim to be artists, is a personal experience. And then in the afternoon, gender and sexuality is who we are as humans. And so those roundtables and then the collab sessions, I think were quite intimate, and both actually we're fortunate to have members of the roundtable participate in those collab sessions, which I thought was really helpful and good.
Would anybody like to comment on those? And if you want to, raise your hand. Okay. We do have a question in the Q&A about how long the recordings will be available. So for conference participants, they are indefinitely available. They are what you gain by registering for the conference. We don't know when we might share them more publicly. We have a YouTube channel, and we'll just have to leave the conference and have some discussions about possibly doing that. So I just wanted to mention that. And then we can go to today, the last day. We just came off of the panel on the session with Michael Twitty on rice, the savor of the South. And before that, there was a partner panel on what happens when corporations pledge to be anti-racist. I can say that for the book talk with Michael Twitty, that was nice, kind of coming full circle, because it had a lot of things that we really have been hearing about on here, even though the focus was on rice. We heard about sort of a lot of African diaspora kind of themes were really important there. Black community, I think, was also really important there. And, I think one thing, the way this conference actually began many years ago was out of an interest in historic Black communities, and getting recognition for that history, figuring out ways how to promote that history. And I feel like this book, like other features of the conference and other days, helped to do that. So kind of took us back to our origins, as well as bringing in some real important themes for now. And I just love that it was focused on rice, one particular crop, one particular food, but there's so much to learn about it related to Black folks and Black history.
Yeah, no, your comment about it connecting everything, I mean, it connected education, so like teaching and passing on knowledge, Black business and sort of economic liberation, and gender roles, so the role of women and men in different contexts and settings, and how that changes and all. So it was again, maybe this was Carla's plan, but it's some of these things surprisingly came together. We're sort of at time for this. I see Jerome has her hand up, and so we'll get to that. I do also just want to make sure that we, Carla mentioned the names of some of the folks that have been really involved. So I'll go through a short list, and then go ahead.
I actually just wanted we haven't discussed the collab sessions nor the student sessions, and I just wanted to bring up a quick discussion about those. And actually, I would love to hear from people about the collab session. So the design of this conference, as we said in the very beginning, was to have the roundtables and then provide a space for people to connect and discuss later. We didn't have the high of attendance at the roundtables, at the collab sessions that we did at the roundtables, but we still had a pretty good showing, and that allowed us to go into breakout groups and have discussions. I would just love for a couple of seconds to hear from the audience about how you feel those collab sessions worked for you, because they were brand new as a feature for us to try to get people connected. Let's see if anybody's got their hands up. Okay, how about Pamela?
I thought the collaboration sessions were excellent. It allowed us the opportunity to come together after the panelists spoke.
Great.
Providing their knowledge on a subject matter area.
Good, thank you. And we also have Donna.
I enjoyed the collab sessions, the ones that I did get a chance to participate in. Sometimes I didn't get a chance to participate in the panel. However, the collab session allowed me to experience a little bit of the panel discussion. So I appreciated that, and to connect with other people who were reflecting either across the state or in other states about what we heard during the panel discussion. So I thought it was a good experience, especially during a pandemic and having a virtual conference. Thank you for that.
Great. and Marvin. Marvin, you have to unmute.
I found that the collab session was very engaging. It gave you the opportunity to get more involved and engaged in the subject. And not only that, but share some of your own experiences and knowledge, which kind of help bring a lot of the subject matter together. But I found it very interesting. This is my first time attending this, and it really blew me away in a way, you know what I'm saying? So I can't wait until next year until we do this again, unless you guys got one planned in 6 months. But, because I'm just saying that's a long way. You might want to think of that. That keeps us more engaged though. But I really appreciate this. It really kind of opened my eyes to a lot of things that really that I didn't have the missing pieces. And so I think this was great. I really appreciate attending this.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And Jerome? Can you unmute? There you go.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, I'm a talker, so I like to talk. And so the collab sessions were great for me. I remember attending 2 years ago when you had it in person. And I don't think it was a session I attended that I had to say something. So I enjoyed that a lot. But on the rice, I really thoroughly enjoyed the last session you just had. And I think about the idea that rice, I watch a lot of public broadcasting shows, and everywhere they travel, I think almost always it's rice. I went to college with kids who didn't eat grits, but they always had rice. Different ways to prepare rice. They liked it with sugar or whatever. And I don't remember growing up in our household unless I think my dad, we had rice at least 3 times a week, okay? If not 3, we had it 2 times. So I enjoyed the things that he talked about and the experiences he's had with different countries, how they prepare rice and the things that they do with rice. So I thoroughly enjoyed that last session. Thought it was a good closing session to have.
Great. We also had some student sessions, and these, as you probably know, were for undergraduates only. It was also a new feature of the conference. The undergraduates were part of our team in planning some of these activities, especially their own sessions. And they've been meeting on their own at the end of the days when we had roundtables to just have sort of a student-only discussion about the topics for that particular day, especially the topics for the roundtable. So we'll be following up with them just to see what they take away from it. But I just wanted to acknowledge that we did have student participation in this. And some of the students were attending the collab sessions and the roundtables as well.
And so thank you all for attending this closing session. As I mentioned before we leave, I do want to lift up the names of all the folks who've helped put this together. I want to start first with Benita Ramsey and Cara Stith, who have been here literally, maybe not literally virtually with Carla and I through all of these sessions. During the conference, but then also from the beginning of planning the conference. So I mean, I think not literally nothing can happen without them. Then the Fuller team includes Trisha Remetier, Rachel Ear, Kiara Childs, Miriam Johnson, who have been attending weekly meetings alongside Carla and I and Benita and Cara, planning the conference, planning the student sessions, working with all of the roundtable panelists, getting their information, and processing things, all of that. And then beyond that group, there are a number of folks, Amy King and Karen McFarland and David Knowles and other folks that work with Carla at IAR and with myself over the Keenan Institute and at UNC broadly, who've been helping with processing things and making sure that technology works. And so there are literally, I don't know, probably 40 people across UNC who have committed significant time to making sure that this conference was able to happen. Not to mention, of course, our sponsors, financial sponsors as well, many of whom are at UNC, but also at other universities, NC State University, as well as a number of private entities, RTI, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina, PNC Bank. All of those sponsors are listed on the conference website. Yeah, I mean, we talked this morning and earlier in the conference, we were talking about pledges around anti-racism, and it's not a small thing. And so we appreciate organizations that are willing to help us do this. And I'll say have had no interest in telling us what to do. So they're playing a risk with us, perhaps, but we appreciate that support from all of those different groups.
That's right. Well, I guess this is the closing of the closing. Thanks to everybody for joining us. I think the extensive thanks go to this audience that's been here and's been supporting us for years. And I'm seeing in the chat, some people are, repeat attendees clearly, and happy to come back, and we're happy to have you back. And for those of you that was your first time, welcome. And we're really glad you joined us. This is always a special event for us, and we couldn't do it without you. So we just want to thank you. Take care of yourselves and stay in community and collaboration.